Ever stop and wonder how a country can go from just a few small colonies to, well, a global superpower in just a couple hundred years? It's an absolutely incredible story, and that's the journey we're about to take. I mean, really think about it. How did this small collection of settlements, kind of clinging to the edge of a huge continent, turn into one of the most powerful and influential nations on the entire planet? That's the big question we're going to dig into. All right, so to really get America, you have to go way, way back to the beginning. See, long before any European ships showed up, this was a land with its own rich history, a history that was about to collide with these new arrivals and build towards a truly revolutionary conflict. This timeline, wow, it covers a mind-boggling stretch of time. For more than 15,000 years, this continent was home to all these complex Native American societies. Then, boom. In what is really a blink of an eye in historical terms, you get European contact in 1492. That set off a massive chain reaction, right? It led to permanent English settlements like Jamestown, and in just a century and a half, to open rebellion like the Boston Tea Party. And you know, it really all boiled down to this one, simple, incredibly powerful idea. The colonists just thought it was completely absurd that a government an entire ocean away could slap taxes on them without their say-so. This wasn't just some argument over money. No way. This was a fight over a huge principle, the right to have a voice in how you're governed. So that feeling of being wronged, it wasn't just talk. It absolutely ignited a fire. And that leads us straight into our second act, the revolution and the super dramatic birth of a brand new nation. So in 1776, Thomas Jefferson writes these words that we all know so well now. But you have to understand, back then, this was an explosive, radical concept. It wasn't just a declaration of war. It was saying that governments don't give you rights. Governments exist to protect the rights you are already born with. That idea was a complete game changer. And yet, here's the central, painful contradiction that's baked right into the nation's founding. While all these words were being written about liberty and equality, hundreds of thousands of people were enslaved, denied the very rights this new country claimed to stand for. You know, winning the war was just the first impossible task. The even harder part came next. How do you build a country from scratch? Well, first they had to create this whole new rule book for a government, which became the Constitution. Then they needed a leader to steer the ship. And who else but the hero of the war, George Washington, as their first president. Okay, so now the new nation starts to grow at this incredible speed. But all this expansion was also making a deep wound even deeper, a wound that would eventually tear the country in two, the institution of slavery. And the fuel for all this expansion was this really powerful and, frankly, dangerous idea called manifest destiny. This was the belief that America had some kind of God-given right to expand across the entire continent. And while it drove the nation's incredible growth, it came at a terrible, terrible cost, justifying the forced removal and tragic destruction of so many Native American nations. And this slide just lays out the problem perfectly. As the country got bigger, it was really becoming two different societies. You had the industrial North, which was slowly but surely turning against slavery. And then you had the agricultural South, where the entire economy, the entire way of life, was built on the backs of enslaved people. These two worlds, they just couldn't exist together forever. The result was inevitable, the American Civil War. It was just a brutal, bloody conflict. It pitted brother against brother, and it wasn't just a fight over land, but a fight for the very soul and the future of the United States. So, what happened after the war? The results were monumental. First, the country was saved. It stayed one nation. Second, the 13th Amendment officially abolished slavery. But winning a war didn't just magically erase centuries of injustice. It was really just the beginning of a long, difficult journey toward equality, a journey that, in many ways, is still going on today. Now, after healing from the Civil War, the United States enters this period of just explosive transformation. This is what really set the stage for it to become a true global giant. And a huge piece of that transformation? People. Over 30 million immigrants. Just let that number sink in. They flooded into the country in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, all chasing that American dream. And it was their labor that fueled the nation's incredible, explosive growth.
At the exact same time, there's a technological explosion happening that's totally reshaping the country. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about building factories. It was about railroads that stitched the whole continent together and the magic of electricity lighting up the cities. It turns the U.S. into an absolute economic powerhouse. And that new economic muscle, it quickly turned into global power. Just look at this timeline. From the Spanish-American War to the trenches of World War I, America kept getting pulled into these huge global conflicts. By the time it came out of the ashes of World War II, it wasn't just a regional player anymore. It was one of the two dominant superpowers on the entire planet. And that brings us to the modern era. This is a period that's really defined by a deep struggle, the fight to finally live up to those ideals from the founding, both out on the world stage and, maybe most importantly, right here at home. So after World War II, America was basically fighting on two fronts at the same time. On the outside, it was locked in this tense, decades-long ideological battle with the Soviet Union, the Cold War. And on the inside, it was facing this powerful, undeniable movement demanding an end to racial injustice. And this fight for justice at home, it created some of the most iconic and powerful moments in all of American history. Every single one of these was a hard-fought victory. From landmark court cases that started to tear down segregation, to the incredible courage of regular people like Rosa Parks, and the soaring vision of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. The civil rights movement didn't just change the laws. It forced the entire nation to take a hard look in the mirror. So, after all that history, where does that leave the United States today? Well, as you can see here, it's a nation of huge contrasts. On the one hand, you've got these incredible strengths, the world's biggest economy, a leader in innovation. But on the other hand, there are these deep, ongoing challenges, right? Things like income inequality, intense political divisions. It's this constant balancing act. And that kind of brings us right back to now. The story of America is one of constant change, of conflict, of trying to reinvent itself. It's not over. The story is still being written. And the big question that all this history leaves us with is, what's the next chapter going to be?